Well, hello everybody, I'm Gary from Lantana Removal Queensland, 0449 986 880, and we're based out of Narangba. My son and I do Lantana eradication. So basically I had an interesting phone call 2 days ago from the Brisbane City Council, which was really telling and really interesting. So basically the council admits that they are aware that the Lantana's being illegally left where it is and that it's being released to the environment. Now, interestingly, through those conversations, it was quite telling that they really didn't want to back up the other gentleman's statements of their nil operational operational budgets and operational works in Lantana, which was quite interesting. But what's more interesting is that I've written to the Attorney General's office, to New South Wales Attorney General, to the Agricultural Minister, to the Premier. I've written to each and every person through those groups, and the Queensland Attorney General has said, oh no, sorry, this is actually Mark Furner's problem. We're sending it over to Mark Furner so he can deal with it. So poor old Mark Furner, he cops a hell of a flogging. But it's interesting because the actual conversations had with the Department of Agriculture and Forestry held up those views that this material can't be left where it is, and their response is that I should keep negotiating with the councils. So it's quite interesting that the federal government and the state government don't actually enforce any sort of regulation over the councils. The Brisbane City Council quite interestedly alluded that they're no longer the most or one of the most profitable councils in the country. They're pretty poor and they can't afford to deal with Lantana, which was completely the opposite to what I was told originally. So it's quite interesting, and the person that was in charge of the whole weed section of the Brisbane City Council now is only in charge of the parks section. So it really is hard to keep up with, but still at the end of the day, we nutted that down and rounded that down to the fact that they rely on, apparently, expertise from the bush regenerators. It didn't say where the bush regenerators came from, but the bush regenerators are apparently who they use for a lot of their information, okay, on how they should do things, which a lot of those guys, whether they're volunteer and come through the land care, because see, a bush regenerator is just somebody who works in the bush, and it's a fancy title. It doesn't mean that they have any knowledge as to Lantana or anything else. And look, as I said to him, in this last 10 years they doubled the level of Lantana, so whatever they've been doing, you wouldn't even be calling it catastrophic. It's a bigger figure than that. So it's quite interesting, but you know, you really couldn't really nail anybody's feet to the floor, except that as I said to him, whoever you've got in charge of those sections, whoever is actually making the decisions from the mayor on down, has no clue about Lantana. It's factually correct. And that's where he went on to say, oh, we rely on bush regenerators and other people to tell us different things. But they're supposed to be experts. When they take people to court, or as that gentleman had come to me from Brookfield and said he'd been served papers to say that he should actually clean up, or else they're going to come onto his property and clean up for him. Within that situation, the council then goes to the courts and misleads the courts and says, oh, we're experts in the field. We know all this stuff about Lantana and about these weeds, and therefore the other party has to clean them up, or else we have to charge them and you give us the money for it, you know, while they have all this material growing all over their lands. And that was what I got upset about and brought that to your attention, was because they'd finished telling me that Lantana was low risk, and they weren't ever going to touch it again. But in this person's interaction with the council then told him it's actually a noxious weed. Now the same thing happens in Logan City Council, in Somerset, in all of these other councils. It goes from being low risk to no risk to not toxic anymore to not noxious anymore, to all these different things. And Anastasia Palaszczuk and Scott Morrison do nothing about this. But they've been aware of this, well, they've been aware of it for 10 months. Scott Morrison's been aware of it for 2 months, but before him, Mr. Turnbull had these letters for the 10 months, so he was, up until he was shoved out of office. But within that, they were all aware that the councils haven't been doing anything about these issues for the last 20, 30 years. And yet they haven't jumped to and gone, oh geez, let's get you on board, let's go and get stuck into this work and get this stuff cleaned up. The Lantana has to be cleaned out of the high country and the wet areas and the sides of roads, because it's created a completely new environment that this material is, as I showed in that facts of Lantana, the expansion rate of the material now is in areas that are in that 3,600 plants for one plant area. So how did it get to be low risk? I asked the council that, and I said to him, so, you know, where did this low risk come from? Oh, you know, they get all, you know, can't speak anymore. But they were just finished telling you that it had been altered secretly by the state government to be called low risk and naturalised within the country. Who voted for it? Who put it up? What meetings did they have? Where were they held? And who attended those meetings? And what did they use to justify this, changing it to low risk? Like, there are a lot of people, and I asked him this, I said, so are you going to support the people who clean this material up within your shop? Oh, no, we don't really help anybody in any way. But hold it a minute, if the people that will clean the material up will clean it up, why don't you support them and clean up the areas around them and support them to ask their neighbours to clean up around them? Oh, well, no, we really don't want to get involved in it. At what point is the Lord Mayor of Brisbane never going to stand up and go, you know what, actually I support that, and we'll do it ourselves as well on our lands? You know, all of these councils have, and that the Moreton Bay Regional Council was written to before Brisbane City Council on this subject just a week ago, and all of their councillors were sent this material and said, you know what, we're aware that this is going on illegally, in response to their weeds section saying, no, you're overrepresenting it. It doesn't have to be eradicated. Well, actually, if it's alive, it's being released to the environment. There is nowhere that these people can show you or tell you how they're stopping it being released to the environment. Now, unless we really get serious about this and force the government to actually stand up and do the right thing, like Scott Morrison, they're the overarching you know, mechanism to say this is what happens in the country. Unless they take this material seriously, then our land prices are just going to completely plummet. You know, we have people like these jobs that are contacting us, and they've paid a considerable amount of money for land. 100 acres and 50 acres of it is Lantana, up steep inclines and right up into the hillsides, where the state government's departments say, oh no, you couldn't, you know, people couldn't clear that because, oh no, you couldn't do that. Well, we've been doing it for 40 years. So why is that a problem? It's because they don't want to spend any money on their end of it cleaning up their stuff. But this job here will graphically show how this material pours down to those, out of that high country, down those channels and corridors, and then infests the lower country, and just continues from property to property to property, using those watercourses to run. Now, this is that serious an issue, and we have no government support that actually stands up to go, we really do need to do something about this. And yet this is the important part of getting people's awareness raised enough to say, this is going to cost us a fortune in the future. With those growth rates of those materials in the Lantana facts videos, those particular issues are that grave for our country that if we don't force the governments to change their policies, or to follow through on just the policies that are in place now, just do what they're supposed to do now, we are going to pay a terrible price for it. You've got properties now being sold for half of what they are worth because the Lantana infestations are that large. Now that has a huge effect, because the banks are going to end up being burnt there and go, well, actually, you know, these people don't have enough equity to cover the loss of $500,000, so we're losing the $500,000. These things are going to cause terrific hardship in our communities in the very near future. And this could have all been avoided if our government had just lived up to the actual law that they have in place now. Not changed laws, but just lived up to those laws as they stand now. They did try to close doors and change loopholes and everything else, but they forgot very, very real facts, that this affects all Australians, and the cost of this is going to be borne by all Australians. And until we stand up for that, we're going to have a big problem. Now, if you're buying a property like these people were, my suggestion is to you, don't. Unless you've got a couple $100,000 to buy equipment to actually deal with that Lantana, for God's sake, don't go down that path. You're in a world of hurt. People get a, barter a price, and they knock down the price, and they get $100,000 off the $1 million cost of the property, say, and then they go and spend that $100,000 on renovations for the house. But this material was a $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 problem, and it's still growing and consuming the host. It's consuming the property. Until the banks wake up and go, oh my Lord, actually we're lending bad money on bad situations where these people have no expertise to be able to deal with these issues. And it will collapse the property market. It will cause horrendous problems. Now, they didn't like that I'd said that huge areas of our communities and our state and our shires have been written off. They didn't like that statement, but they preferred to word that as, no, actually, we've just decided that we protect other areas. Okay, so we prioritise other areas to be higher than that. What sort of double Dutch is that? So realistically, you're saying you've got no money to do anything about the ones that are out of control already. So you haven't written them off. But hold on a minute, you just said you have. There's no other way of looking at that. But we will protect these ones because somebody we like lives there, and people that we can't be bothered with live there in Sanford and Dayborough and Mount Mee and Woodford, and the list goes on and on and on. So that's where we're left with, and that's one of the things that we have to absolutely change, because they really have a big consequence for our whole of our communities. And these government departments honestly think they're very clever in just shafting all of our children and the whole lot of us in breaking the laws. I'm still waiting for correspondence back, but the fact is they're operating illegally, and they know they're operating illegally. But because one department's getting away with it, the other departments go, well, why don't we just go along that bandwagon? And the state government and federal government have absolutely no control over the departments below them. It's a shonky system when you write to the Attorney General's office, who actually works with the law and justice in the court system, and the courts have been misled purposely by the councils, while the councils take action against people, and they're doing this over the enormous scale that they're doing it around the whole areas. They're misleading the courts. How can the court hold these people's statements and what they're telling them as being learned people while they're breaking the laws? So isn't the courts, or wouldn't the court, or shouldn't the court actually look into what's actually happening in the system and then judge that scenario and weight it to decide whether they uphold these people's actions? The public have had their rates. It's written into the law. It says in the law that they will find against the ratepayer, against the common citizen, and those costs will be put on your rates. It's written in that document from the Department of Agriculture and Forestry that's in the legislation to deal with it that way. They will get damages or get the costs from you and have them added to your rates. So no matter what happens with the sale of the property, they will get paid. Now, how does that happen when these guys are going, yeah, but we don't bother with it in the bottom of our creeks or waterways? And that's what I said to Brisbane City Council. You have no idea of what you're doing, because you're allowing it to grow right through all of these watercourses. Oh, listen, you can put your name down and you can become a supplier to the system, and then hopefully we can shut you up there because you'll be in the system. Well, I'll never be competitive against these people because I do the job properly. I don't keep going back and doing it every year after year after year. Every 5 years it's a complete rebuild again. These guys need to start doing their job properly and having it eradicated properly and paying the proper money. What actually happens with the system, it's so corrupt that these actual Brisbane City Council entities, like the parks, like all these guys, if they like an operator and the operator Oh, you know, does a little bit under the table. They just keep using them. And because it's under a $50,000 contract, they can keep using those people without ever that job going to the mainstream system. So there's huge areas where this system is still corrupt, and the CCC has no idea. And, you know, I've met companies that are actually doing those type of things and having meetings with those managers and their managers. How does the council have all of those people leaving their works and meeting in these environments and these deals being done under the table? How? Now, can you prove all those things? No, you can't prove them because they're actually within the system. They're not doing anything illegal. They're just meeting these people, and, you know, there's little bits and pieces handed over here, there and everywhere. But it means that the system can't be changed, that these people actually get jobs done, that they actually go and get this material out of the bottoms of creeks and out of the watercourses and out of the high country where it has to come out of. Anyway, so that's where we're up to with the council. We're still waiting to hear back from Moreton Bay Regional Council. They have all this information. They have had it absolutely clearly spelled out to them how the illegal operations of allowing this material to be released to the environment, which they admit they're doing, is you know, against the law. And Main Roads have had the same thing, and so has South East Queensland Water. So we're still waiting to hear back. But listen, check out our other video, which I'm going to post very soon, which is about the animal welfare out at Dundas, out near Somerset and Wivenhoe, because that's a real eye-opener of exactly how bad the systems are with animal welfare and how animals are being mistreated. And it also includes the legal obligations for people who are actually doing those things to those animals. They want to be on record that they're very, very careful, because there's a world of hurt coming for them. Anyway, I'm Gary. I'm from Lantana Removal, Queensland. I'm passionate about Lantana. I'm fighting for my country's survival. This material, as it doubles and quadruples, it's going to double in 5 years instead of being 10 years. It's going to double in the next 5, and it's going to double in the 5 after that, or triple in the 5 after that. It's compounding interest. That's the problem with the growth of this material, and where the councils and your governments, your state government, your federal government and your councils are leaving this grow. And they know they're breaking the law by releasing it to the environment. And the other half a dozen weeds that are moving with this weed now are creating supercells. So we have a world of hurt coming because your government doesn't have the courage to stand up and go, you know what? We need to bring this guy in, and we need to sit down and we need to go through all of these things and map out proper procedural targeting of this material in those high value areas. That's what's got to change, and I thank you for your support. Please share the videos around. Please talk to everybody you can. You're the ones that will change what happens in the future, and if we don't change it, our children are going to pay the price for this forever. I can tell you now. Thank you very much for stopping by. Check us out on Facebook under Lantana Removal Queensland. And please, if you know anybody who needs Lantana eradicated, get them to give us a call. Bye-bye.